The cold bites first at exposed skin, a million tiny needles pricking, then a deep, bone-chilling ache that settles in the marrow. It's a cold that doesn't just exist, it devours. A cold that swallows sound, leaving only the rhythmic wheeze of the wind and the frantic thump of my own heart against my ribs. I pull the fur ruff of my parka tighter, the coarse hairs brushing against my frozen eyelashes. The air itself feels brittle, ready to shatter into a million ice crystals at the slightest disturbance. I can see my breath, a ghostly plume that vanishes almost instantly, swallowed by the insatiable maw of the Arctic winter. The world is a monochrome canvas, painted in shades of white and gray. The only color comes from the weak, artificial glow emanating from the outpost windows, a fragile beacon against the encroaching darkness. It's a darkness so profound, so absolute, it feels like a physical weight pressing down on me. A darkness that whispers secrets of forgotten things, of ancient ice and the long, slow death of the sun. I squint, trying to pierce the veil of snow that swirls around me, searching for some familiar landmark, some sign that I'm not utterly lost in this frozen wasteland. But there's nothing. Only the endless, unforgiving white. A sudden gust of wind howls, tearing at my parka like a hungry wolf. The snow stings my face, blurring my vision. I stumble, my boots sinking into the deep drifts. For a moment, panic threatens to overwhelm me. The cold, the darkness, the sheer vastness of this place, it's all too much. I close my eyes, fighting the urge to succumb, to simply lie down and let the snow claim me. But then I remember her face. Her smile, bright and warm as the summer sun. And the memory is enough. Enough to push me forward, one frozen step at a time. The wind seemed to mock my resolve, whipping snowflakes into a frenzy, each one a tiny, icy dagger. I pressed on, drawn by the faint, yellow glow of the outpost, a promise of warmth and safety in this desolate realm. It was more than just a building, it was a haven, a sanctuary against the crushing weight of the Arctic winter. Inside those walls, there was camaraderie, shared stories, and the small comforts that made survival possible. And there, waiting for me, was Ilara. I remember the first time I saw her, huddled by the crackling fire in the mess hall, her face illuminated by the dancing flames. It was 3 years ago, during my first deployment to this forsaken corner of the world. I was fresh out of training, terrified and overwhelmed by the sheer brutality of the environment. She was different. Even in that harsh, unforgiving place, she radiated a quiet strength, a serene beauty that defied the bleak surroundings. Her eyes, the color of the glacial ice, held a depth that hinted at a wisdom beyond her years. She was sketching in a worn notebook, her brow furrowed in concentration. I remember being struck by the delicate grace of her hands as they moved across the page, bringing life to the stark white paper. Later that night, during my watch, she found me staring at the aurora borealis dancing across the sky. I was lost in the spectacle, mesmerized by the ethereal beauty of the shimmering lights. "It's like the sky is breathing," I murmured, more to myself than to her. She smiled, a small, knowing smile that reached her eyes. "It is," she said softly. "It's the Earth's soul, whispering its secrets." We stood in silence for a long time, watching the aurora paint the night sky with its vibrant hues. It was then, under the watchful gaze of the dancing lights, that I knew I was falling in love with her. We spent the next few months exploring the frozen landscape together, finding beauty in the starkness, solace in the solitude. We shared stories, dreams, and fears, forging a bond that transcended the physical distance between us. I learned that she was an artist, drawn to the Arctic by its raw, untamed beauty. She saw poetry in the ice, music in the wind, and a profound sense of peace in the vast emptiness. She taught me to see the world through her eyes, to appreciate the subtle nuances of the landscape, to find beauty in the seemingly desolate. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in fiery hues of orange and purple, she showed me a sketch she had been working on. It was a portrait of me, standing against the backdrop of the aurora borealis. My face was etched with the weariness of the Arctic winter, but my eyes held a spark of hope, a reflection of the love I felt for her. "I wanted to capture your spirit," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "The strength and resilience that I see in you." I was speechless, overwhelmed by the beauty of her art and the depth of her affection. I took her hand, my fingers intertwining with hers, and we stood in silence, watching the last rays of sunlight fade into the darkness. That was 3 years ago. 3 years of shared sunsets, whispered secrets, and a love that bloomed in the heart of the Arctic winter. 3 years of deployments and separations, of longing and anticipation. And now, I was back, braving the unforgiving cold, driven by the promise of seeing her again, of feeling her warmth, of losing myself in the depths of her glacial eyes. The outpost was closer now, its yellow glow a beacon of hope in the overwhelming darkness. I quickened my pace, my heart pounding with a mixture of anticipation and fear. What would she say? Would she still feel the same way? The questions swirled in my mind, like the snowflakes dancing around me. But one thing was certain: I would face any challenge, endure any hardship, to be with her. Because in the heart of the Arctic winter, I had found something truly precious, a love that burned brighter than any sun. The radio crackled to life, spitting static and a garbled voice. It was Captain Volkov, his voice tight, strained. "All units, report to the observation deck. Immediate threat. Repeat, immediate threat." Fear, cold and sharp, sliced through the numbness. Whatever was out there, it had rattled Volkov, a man who'd stared down polar bears without flinching. Dmitri grabbed his rifle, the metal biting into his gloved hand. He glanced at Anya, her face pale in the dim light, her eyes wide with a fear that mirrored his own. He squeezed her hand, a silent promise. They would face this together. The observation deck was a claustrophobic space, the thick, reinforced glass offering a terrifying view of the storm-ravaged landscape. The wind howled like a banshee, and the snow swirled in a blinding white vortex. But it wasn't the storm that made Dimitri's blood run cold. Emerging from the swirling white, their forms shifting and indistinct, were figures. Humanoid, but impossibly tall, impossibly gaunt. Their limbs were elongated, their skin stretched taut over bone, and their eyes glowed with an unnatural, malevolent light. They moved with a jerky, unnatural gait, their silence more terrifying than any roar. Volkov barked orders, his voice barely audible above the wind. "Weapons free! Hold the line! For Russia!" The soldiers, a mix of hardened veterans and green recruits, raised their rifles, their faces grim. Dmitri aimed, his heart pounding in his chest, his finger trembling on the trigger. He had never seen anything like this. This was not a threat they had trained for. This was something else. The creatures advanced, their silence broken only by the crunch of their feet on the snow. They moved with an unnerving speed, their elongated limbs covering ground at an impossible rate. The first shots rang out, the sharp cracks of the rifles swallowed by the wind. But the bullets seemed to have little effect. The creatures staggered, but did not fall. They continued their relentless advance, their glowing eyes fixed on the outpost. Then chaos. One of the creatures slammed against the observation deck window. The reinforced glass cracked, spiderwebbing across the surface. Another creature followed, and then another. The window groaned under the assault, the metal frame twisting and bending. Volkov screamed, "Brace for impact! Brace for impact!" But it was too late. With a deafening roar, the window shattered, sending shards of glass and metal flying through the air. The creatures surged into the observation deck, their inhuman forms filling the small space. Dmitri fired, emptying his magazine into the closest creature. It stumbled, but did not fall. It reached for him with its long, skeletal fingers, its touch like ice. He felt a searing pain in his arm as the creature clawed at him, tearing through his thick layers of clothing. He screamed, a primal sound of fear and pain. He doesn't remember much after that. A blur of violence, of screams and gunshots. The sickening crunch of bone, the metallic tang of blood. He remembers seeing Anya fighting, her face contorted with rage and terror, her rifle a desperate shield against the onslaught. And then darkness. He woke up in the infirmary, his body aching, his mind reeling. Anya was there, sitting beside him, her face etched with exhaustion and grief. She took his hand, her touch cold but reassuring. "It's over," she whispered, her voice hoarse. "They're gone." The outpost was a ruin. The bodies of his comrades lay scattered amidst the wreckage, their faces frozen in expressions of terror. Volkov was gone. Most were gone. The creatures were gone. But the silence they left behind was deafening. The sun never came back. Now, the silence is almost comforting. It's a constant hum in the background of his life, a reminder of what he lost, but also a shield against the overwhelming noise of the outside world. He avoids crowds, loud music, anything that might trigger a memory, a flashback. The faces of his fallen comrades still haunt his dreams, their eyes wide with terror, their screams echoing in the darkness. He sees Anya in his dreams too, but her face is different. It's not the face of the woman he loves, but the face of a warrior, scarred and hardened by the horrors she witnessed. He sometimes wonders if he even knows her anymore. He spends most of his days alone, tending to the small garden he built behind his apartment building. He grows vegetables, mostly, things that remind him of his childhood. He finds solace in the simple act of planting seeds, of nurturing life in a world that seems determined to destroy it. The soil is cold and unforgiving, but he persists, coaxing life from the frozen earth. It's a small act of defiance, a way of saying that even in the face of unimaginable horror, life can still find a way to bloom. He tries to talk to Anya, but the words always seem to catch in his throat. They share a silence now, a silence born of shared trauma, a silence that is both comforting and suffocating. They live together, but they are strangers, bound together by a past they can never escape. He sees the pain in her eyes, the same pain that he feels in his own heart. They are both broken, shattered by the events of that night, and he doesn't know if they will ever be whole again. Sometimes, late at night, he wakes up in a cold sweat, his heart pounding in his chest. He reaches for Anya, but she is always asleep, her face pale and drawn in the moonlight. He lies awake for hours, listening to the silence, waiting for the dawn. He knows that the creatures are gone, that they will probably never return. But the fear remains, a cold knot in his stomach, a constant reminder of the darkness that lurks just beyond the edge of the light. He still has the scar on his arm, a jagged white line that serves as a constant reminder of that night. He traces it with his fingers sometimes, feeling the rough texture of the healed skin. It's a part of him now, a permanent mark of the horror he survived. He doesn't try to hide it. He wears it like a badge of honor, a testament to his resilience, his refusal to be broken. He knows that he will never be the same. The frozen army outpost in the Arctic changed him forever. It took away his innocence, his naivete, his belief in the goodness of humanity. But it also gave him something. It gave him a strength he never knew he possessed. It gave him a reason to fight, to survive, to keep going, even when he feels like giving up. He will carry the scars of that night with him for the rest of his life. But he will also carry the memory of his comrades, their courage, their sacrifice. And he will honor their memory by living his life to the fullest, by never forgetting the lessons he learned in the frozen darkness. He will keep planting his garden, keep nurturing life, keep fighting for hope, even in the face of despair. Because that is all he has left. And it is enough. He owes it to them. He owes it to himself. He owes it to Anya. The aurora borealis, a celestial curtain ripped open to reveal the infinite, danced with renewed ferocity. Green and violet tendrils writhed across the sky, a silent scream against the eternal night. It was a spectacle of beauty, but tonight, it felt like a mocking reminder of the vibrant life absent from this frozen tomb. Inside the Outpost command center, the holographic display flickered with the decoded message. It wasn't an attack order. It wasn't a distress call. It was a confession. A detailed account, penned by General Volkov himself, explaining everything. The experiment. The deception. The deliberate isolation. It was all designed to test the limits of human endurance, the breaking point of the human spirit, under the most extreme duress imaginable. He wanted to see how far loyalty could be stretched, How much sacrifice could be demanded before the threads of sanity finally snapped? He wanted to weaponize resilience. A wave of nausea washed over Anya. The betrayal was a physical blow, a gut punch that stole her breath. Years of unwavering devotion, of unquestioning obedience, reduced to data points in a cold, calculated experiment. The faces of her fallen comrades flashed before her eyes, their sacrifices rendered meaningless, their deaths orchestrated. Dmitri stood beside her, his face a mask of granite. He read the message in silence, his jaw clenching with each line. The tremor in his hand was almost imperceptible, but Anya saw it. She knew the weight he carried, the burden of leadership he had borne with such stoic grace. This revelation threatened to shatter everything he believed in. He turned to her, his eyes, usually so bright with resolve, now clouded with a profound sadness. He used us, Anya. The words were barely a whisper, carried on the recycled air of the command center. Anya reached out, her gloved hand covering his. We still have each other, Dmitri. We still have our honor. The confession went on to reveal the failsafe. A hidden transmitter, buried deep beneath the ice, capable of sending a signal to end the experiment, to bring them home. But Volkov had deliberately withheld its existence, wanting to see how long they would endure without hope. The location was marked on the holographic map. Dmitri gave the order. A small team, led by Anya and himself, would venture out to retrieve the transmitter. The risk was immense. The blizzard raged outside, and the temperature plummeted further with each passing hour. But they had no choice. Hope, however fragile, was their only weapon now. The journey was a descent into hell. The wind howled like a banshee, tearing at their exposed skin. The ice beneath their boots was treacherous, threatening to swallow them whole. They moved slowly, deliberately, guided by the faint signal emanating from the buried transmitter. Finally, they reached the designated location. It was marked by a single, rusted metal pole, barely visible beneath the snow. Anya and Dmitri began to dig, their hands numb with cold. The ice was thick and unforgiving, resisting their every effort. Hours passed. The blizzard intensified. Doubt began to creep into Anya's mind. Was this another lie? Another cruel twist of the knife? Then, Dmitri's shovel struck something solid. Metal. He dropped to his knees, frantically clearing away the ice. A small, weather-beaten box was revealed. Inside, nestled in a bed of frozen wires, was the transmitter. Dmitri looked at Anya, his eyes shining with a mixture of relief and disbelief. He reached for the activation switch. But as he did, Anya saw it. A faint glint of metal beneath the snow, near the base of the pole. She lunged forward, pushing Dmitri aside just as a pressure plate triggered a hidden explosive. The blast ripped through the ice, sending a shockwave that threw them both back. The transmitter was destroyed. The hope extinguished. Anya lay on the ice, the wind whipping around her. Her ears rang, her body ached. She looked at Dmitri, who was struggling to sit up. His face was covered in blood. Why, Anya? Why did you do that? He gasped. Anya looked at the rusted pole, the marker for their salvation. Etched into the metal, barely visible beneath the grime and ice, were the words. Volkov's folly. It wasn't a failsafe, Dmitri, she said, her voice hoarse. It was a trap. He wanted to see how we would react when hope was within our grasp, only to be snatched away. Dmitri stared at the pole, his eyes widening with comprehension. The realization dawned on him. Volkov had planned for this moment. He wanted to witness their ultimate despair. But in that moment of utter darkness, something shifted within Anya. The despair was there, yes, but it was mingled with a newfound resolve. Volkov wanted to break them. He wanted to strip them of their humanity. But he had underestimated the resilience of the human spirit. He had underestimated their will to survive. Anya struggled to her feet, helping Dmitri up beside her. The blizzard raged on, but they stood firm, two figures silhouetted against the swirling snow. They were battered, broken, but not defeated. He may have taken our hope, Dmitri, Anya said, her voice ringing with defiance. But he hasn't taken our choice. We choose how this ends. She looked out into the swirling darkness, into the heart of the endless night. We choose to live. And with that, they turned and walked back towards the outpost, not as soldiers obeying orders, but as survivors forging their own path, into an uncertain future, under the cold, indifferent gaze of the aurora borealis. Their steps were slow, their bodies weary, but their spirits, somehow, were unbroken. The experiment may have failed, but the human spirit, it seemed, had not. The fate of the outpost, and its inhabitants, remained unknown, lost in the frozen expanse. But one thing was certain, they would face it together.